Cairo 7 News at 5 o'clock starts right now.
Tonight, hear from the survivors.
Something was helping me, telling me to get underneath the table.
After a deadly derailment in Pierce County, an Amtrak train went off the tracks and on to I-5.
And it just put me in this mode of, I was scared, I was really scared.
We have team coverage from all angles as investigators try to piece together how it happened. And good evening, I'm Steve Rabel.
I'm Monique Minglovin. That train went off the rails this morning with cars falling along the southbound lanes of the freeway in DuPont. That stretch of freeway will be closed through at least Tuesday morning.
Within the past hour, the chief of the Washington State Patrol told us 3 passengers were killed, 100 people were hurt. There were 77 passengers and 7 crew members on board. 13 of the cars jumped the tracks, hitting 5 cars and 2 semi-trucks below. We have live team coverage for you starting tonight with Cairo 7's Kevin McCarty, who has been on scene all day in DuPont.
Passengers and eyewitnesses describe moments of terror as an Amtrak train plunged off a railroad overpass onto Interstate 5. It was the first commercial run of the Amtrak Cascades over the new Point Defiance bypass. For the 77 passengers and 7 crew members on board, that trip came to an abrupt, horrifying end, leaving the tracks and freeway littered with debris from 14 cars and 2 locomotives, as well as cars under the bridge.
Next thing I know, I see sparks coming off of that bridge intersection. I was like, okay, this is not good. I was just like, what do I do?
Trains along this route are expected to move at speeds of up to 79 miles per hour, but it's not yet known if speed played a role in the crash.
I can tell you that it's being investigated by NTSB, and anything beyond that right now until their findings are out is pure speculation.
The train was running along a newly upgraded stretch of tracks, and the cause of today's derailment still isn't clear. The National Transportation Safety Board sent a GO team to the site to begin an investigation.
With expertise in the following areas: operations, mechanical, track, signals, human performance, and survival factors.
Cairo 7 was there Friday as an inaugural run by the same train carrying State Department of Transportation employees and media made a run along the same stretch of tracks. The Point Defiance bypass moves the passenger trains off the congested waterfront route through Tacoma and University Place, where slow-moving oil and freight trains can slow Amtrak runs.
To say that this is going to go probably well into the night at this point.
The derailment is expected to cause lengthy delays on southbound Interstate 5. Some traffic is being diverted to Joint Base Lewis McChord to try to get around the blocked freeway.
We're asking people that if they do not need to travel, please stay at home, don't travel on I-5. This is going to go well into the night, if not until tomorrow.
And the work is beginning at that train overpass right now. As you can see, if you take a look behind me, you can see probably the shadow of a crane that has moved into the area. We're told that they are going to start to stabilize those cars and try to prepare to move them. But the Washington State Patrol and the Washington State Department of Transportation says all of that is going to be done in conjunction with the National Transportation Safety Board investigators. So when those cars will actually come off, when they will be moved, when they'll be removed from the site isn't clear at this point. And of course, that bridge has to be inspected to determine that it's safe before traffic can resume. It's going to be a long wait. Live in DuPont, Kevin McCarty, Cairo 7 News.
Kevin, you have covered these sorts of stories before: planes, train crashes. Give us a better sense, a more involved sense of what those investigators are up against, how long this could all take place. From your vantage point there, where you were standing, how long do you think that mess is still going to be there?
Well, it's anyone's guess at this point because we don't know what's in the mind of the investigators and what it is they want to see. National Transportation Safety Board investigators have a reputation as being very thorough, very methodical, and they move at the speed of the investigation, and that's what they're going to do in this case. One of the good things we will see from them is when they begin to get information, the NTSB tends to release that information early on in the process. But as I'm sure as you know, investigations into plane crashes and train derailments like this, we won't get results for weeks, possibly even months, before we know exactly what happened here.
It's Kevin McCarty reporting live from the crash scene. Thanks, Kevin.
These were the pictures Scott Claggett snapped on his cell phone moments after he jumped out of Amtrak train number 501. He said he had just left his seat to get food in another car when the crash happened.
I moved within like minutes.
Claggett was one of the 77 passengers traveling from Seattle to Portland when this train derailed just after 7:30 this morning. Emergency crews brought those who were not seriously injured to DuPont City Hall to reunite with family and friends.
And I'm just thanking God I didn't actually move, and I'm just thanking God I'm alive and I'm okay.
Adrian Thompson is a college student from D.C. visiting his mom in Portland for the holidays.
It's my first time taking a train in years, and then all of a sudden I just feel a whole bunch of like turning and rocking of the train, and I just grabbed onto the chair in front of me for dear life. My laptop went flying, my phone went flying.
It kind of went off the bridge onto another car, crushing it.
Jared Cogg said he smelled gas and immediately popped the windows and tried to get other people around him out.
It was nerve-wracking. It was the first time I've ever been through something like that.
That's the cart, actually. That's just twisted.
For Claggett, he said these pictures are still surreal, and he's just thankful to be here telling us what happened.
This puts life into perspective a little bit more.
We learned in just the last hour that there is a hazmat element to this disaster. A diesel spill from a tank on one of the train cars, and this is what the battalion chief from West Pierce Fire and Rescue told us.
The diesel spill, it's a power car. Right behind the locomotive is a power car that does all the power for all the passenger cars that are there. Had 350 gallons of fuel maximum in its tank, and it has spilled into the dirt area next to I-5.
He adds that Amtrak is working with officials at the Department of Ecology on a long-term mitigation plan right now.
Here are some of the first moments when the emergency call came in when that train went over.
Amtrak 501 answering Centralia North, over. Amtrak 501, emergency. We are on the ground. We are on the bridge 5 in the square.
That'll do. Easy stop, tackle.
On the freeway. Need EMS ASAP. It looks like they're already starting to show up.
Our sister station in Portland spoke to a doctor who specializes in emergency medicine and jumped into action at the scene of the derailment after getting caught up in the traffic jam nearby.
Yeah, he called the scene devastating and heart-wrenching, but he said he got encouragement from one patient that was a baby who had been inside the train when it crashed.
That was very encouraging. I examined a little baby who had flown out of his mother's arms and been grabbed by his father in these multiple impacts as the trains hit, and then fell off the tracks and then hit again. And I examined that baby, who was cooing and smiling at me as if nothing had happened, and they were, as far as we could tell on scene, completely intact. And so that was a wonderful boost in morale for me and I think the people around me.
Wow, hard to believe that's possible as we look at these pictures. Now, that doctor called that a bright moment for him. The other bright spot, the first responders. He said he was extremely impressed with how calm, competent, and kind they all were. He also said he was struck by the massive nature of the crash, with the huge Amtrak train cars scattered around 50 yards from the triage tents where people were being cared for.
Facebook posted a page on its site for people to mark themselves safe after the derailment this morning. The social network has done this before for natural disasters and terrorist attacks as well.
Now, stay with the team that stays on the story. So much more to this story, and Cairo 7 News is committed to covering all angles of this deadly Amtrak derailment, both here and also on Cairo7.com. You'll also find the latest developments on all of our social media platforms. Thank you for staying with us. I'm Monique Minglavin.
I'm Steve Rabel. Cairo 7's Joanna Small has been talking to a driver who was on Interstate 5 at the time of the derailment, and Joanna, must have been quite the shock for him.
Steve, what you're seeing behind me is horrifying. You've got rail cars that are dangling off of a bridge onto I-5, but imagine this happened just 100 feet in front of you. Some vehicles heading southbound were struck when that train derailed. Others immediately pulled off the freeway and then tried to help.
It was going pretty fast. I'm thinking, what's going on? And then, like, maybe 2 minutes later, I see it go. I see sparks flying, and it's going off the track.
Trevor Kuvley says when that Amtrak Cascades train carrying 77 passengers went off the track, it came crashing onto I-5. Not 100 feet from him.
I saw people going up, yes.
His car could have been this car, and he doesn't know what happened to this driver.
She was hurt, and I told her just to stay calm, and then somebody else came over, and then I went to go help other people that needed it.
Trevor says he did what he could.
I saw EMS paramedics arrive with the ladder.
Until emergency officials intervened.
And that was from where I was off on the side of the road when I was told to just to get out of the way.
We met Trevor here at the reunification area for families and victims of the derailment. Trevor was looking for solace after witnessing the horrific end of the Amtrak Cascades inaugural run.
First time I'd ever seen anything like this, and I just didn't know what to do, and I just did what I could with what I was taught, and then I agree, it is still surreal.
I reached out to Sound Transit, which owns these tracks, and I asked if there were any issues identified during or after that train's run on Friday held for the media. They told me no. Tonight, I dug deeper into how these tracks were tested and what the NTSB will be doing to investigate why this happened. Tonight, we know this Amtrak train was going over 80 miles an hour, about a quarter mile before it entered this curve. But how fast it was going seconds later when it derailed and plunged down to the interstate below is still unclear.
It's a little bit too early to know. Right now, we're sending investigators onto the scene.
It's a curve Cairo 7 showed you firsthand when our Kevin McCarty rode the same train going the opposite direction on Friday. You can see the overpass and both sides of the interstate. So how did this happen? We dug into the testing of this new high-speed train before today's public launch. It runs parallel to I-5, except here where it crosses the interstate in DuPont. Sound Transit owns the tracks, and we asked about any problems in this section during months of trial runs. Officials said firmly there were no issues. But we have told you of concerns about these trains on this new route going through Lakewood.
These trains are doing 75 to 79 miles an hour, and so if you think you can beat that train, there's no way you can.
In fact, the city of Lakewood sued the state to try to stop the new route, worried about pedestrians and the train's high speed. That speed is now part of the NTSB's investigation, with a GO team heading to Seattle right now.
Tonight, an inaugural train route turns tragic.
Things were flying, glass.
Death and injury as train cars are demolished, vehicles crushed, and others are spared by just seconds.
I looked in my rearview mirror and there was nothing.
As cleanup gets underway, I-5 remains closed, leaving drivers stranded.
8.5 hours.
I left at 7 o'clock this morning.
Our crews have the latest on the victims and the investigation into this deadly derailment. Looking live now at the scene of today's deadly train derailment. 3 people are dead, at least 100 injured. Crews there are working right now to remove debris, including vehicles that were smashed and the derailed train cars as well.
Now, this was a scene earlier in the day from Chopper 7 during full daylight. You can see several of the train cars off the tracks, at least one of them upside down. And now the NTSB is sending a full GO team of investigators to find out what caused the crash on this inaugural trip of this high-speed Amtrak route.
To give you a clear idea of where this was here, that train went off the rails this morning with the cars falling into the southbound lanes of I-5 and DuPont. That stretch of the freeway will be closed at least through Tuesday morning. And good evening. I'm Dave Wagner.
I'm Monique Minglavin, and we have team coverage for you tonight, starting with Cairo 7's Kevin McCarty.
Kevin, firefighters had an extreme challenge getting people out there using things like jaws of life on some of those train cars that were still dangling over I-5.
And they had to pry some people out of their cars, too, that got hit by those train cars when they came plunging off that bridge. Take a look now, and you can see that there is a large crane that is set up here. We've also seen a convoy of trucks that is coming down the southbound lanes of I-5. They appear to be flatbed trucks, so it looks like they may be getting ready to move some of this debris. Now, as you were saying, this train was heading along a straight stretch of track when it headed into a curve just about to cross that bridge over I-5 when suddenly it came crashing down. Facing mangled debris piled onto Interstate 5, investigators with the National Transportation Safety Board have begun looking for the cause of this deadly train derailment. The Amtrak Cascades heading south toward Olympia and Portland plunged off the railroad bridge near DuPont on its first commercial run on the new Point Defiance bypass. 77 passengers were on board, along with 7 crew members.
You know, it's shocking just like anybody else. It's actually kind of surreal. Something like this where train cars are precariously dangling over a freeway. That's something that we do tabletops on, and everybody comes in usually going, oh, that's not going to happen. Well, here we are.
Trains running along the newly upgraded stretch of track can move at speeds of 79 miles per hour. How fast this was moving as tracks running parallel to Interstate 5 curved onto the railroad bridge to leave the bypass and rejoin the main line isn't known. And it's not yet clear what caused the train to fly off the bridge onto the busy freeway below. Fortunately, the train was carrying far fewer people than it would during a busy weekend run.
I mean, it's horrible that this happened to these passengers, but we are, very grateful that there weren't more people involved.
Cairo 7 was on board as the same engine that crashed today pulled the Cascades on an inaugural run along the bypass on Friday, carrying State Department of Transportation employees along with media. The newly opened line is designed to get passenger trains off tracks along Tacoma's waterfront that see congestion from freight and oil trains. Today's derailment will mean long delays on Interstate 5 with debris clogging all southbound lanes.
Of course, we have cranes that are arriving to help us stabilize and remove cars. And then from there, DOT will have to get in and inspect the bridge to make sure that it's safe.
Let's head over to Cairo 7 traffic anchor Rachel Calderon, who is tracking ways you can get around that area. Rachel.
And Dave, as we look at the live pictures of that southbound I-5 commute here in DuPont, you can see that lineup because cars are just trying to make their way into some of the alternates. We know southbound I-5, if you can exit at 118 to Center Drive Gate, this is going to head you into JBLM, and that will reroute you to Highway 510. Now, as we just mentioned, Graham was mentioning that the speeds are really at single digits on Highway 7 through Spanaway and through Roy, all the way heading into Yelm and 510. So that is not an alternate that we have been recommending tonight. We've been recommending Highway 16 in Gig Harbor, link up to Highway 3 and head southbound into Shelton, and then 101 into Olympia back over to I-5. That is a 65-mile detour. I know that is slow, and we know that there is some slowing on Highway 3 backing up all the way into Bremerton. You're just going to have to use an alternate route and give yourself some extra time. Back to you.
Meanwhile, Amy Clancy is talking with rail safety experts about their early theories about this. And Amy's working on this story for us tonight at 7 o'clock. What have you learned, Amy?
Well, according to the Washington State Department of Transportation, the maximum speed should drop from 79 to 30 miles per hour for passenger trains just before the tracks curve to cross Interstate 5. Right where today's crash happened. But a website that maps location and speed from Amtrak's Train Tracker app shows the train was going much faster just before it derailed.
I've seen reports that this train was traveling its last speed at 81 miles an hour. Approaching a curve like that, I find that very hard to believe that that was the speed it should have been operating at.
Keith Millhouse is a nationally known rail safety expert. He was named chairman of Metrolink after this crash near Los Angeles in 2008. He's been brought in to increase rail safety nationwide. So Cairo 7 tracked him down in Los Angeles for his opinion on what happened here today. And I'll have that for you tonight on Cairo 7 at 7 p.m.
This is Cairo 7 at 7.
And we take you to live pictures right now on Cairo 7 at 7. We now know it will be at least tomorrow morning before I-5 southbound at DuPont reopens after today's deadly Amtrak derailment. And in just the past 30 minutes, the mayor of DuPont declared a state of emergency, activating its emergency operations center to help with the response to the tragedy. Even as the investigation is just beginning tonight, we have new perspective you haven't seen on what might have gone wrong.
This animation gives you a detailed look at where it all unraveled. Amtrak's own Train Tracker app clocked the southbound train at 81.1 miles an hour, a quarter of a mile before it approached this curve leading to the bridge over I-5. But Cairo 7 confirmed the speed limit on the bridge for passenger trains is just 30 miles an hour. Amtrak Train 501 left the tracks on that overpass and several cars tumbled to the freeway below. Here is what that stretch looks like in real time. Cairo 7 was on the Amtrak train last Friday for a ceremonial first run on the new Point Defiance bypass. And our cameras were rolling as the train moved into the curve and over the I-5 overpass.
Now here's what else you'll see new at 7. We talk in depth with transportation disaster experts. The critical areas the investigators could already be focusing on. And Jesse has a new warning at 7 o'clock before you're tempted to jump in to help the survivors. eyewitness.
First, let's quickly catch you up on the very latest. 3 people killed, up to 100 hurt. 13 of the train cars jumped the tracks, hitting 5 cars and semis on the freeway below on Interstate 5. The State Ecology Department is now responding to a large diesel spill.
Now, the train derailed just before 7:45 this morning. That was at Mounts Road in DuPont. I-5, as we've said, remains closed southbound at least through tomorrow morning. The sheer magnitude of what happened today and the incredible stories of those who were caught up in the unimaginable and they survived. KIRO 7's Dave Wagner is here with that part of tonight's team coverage.
A lot of us have driven that stretch of southbound I-5, but this was the first day the Amtrak Cascades began passenger travel across that stretch of road. Just 3 days after a ribbon cutting, federal investigators are on scene tonight trying to determine what went wrong. What was supposed to be a celebration became a somber scene of carnage.
I usually, count my blessings every day, but this puts life into perspective.
The inaugural run for Amtrak Cascades 501. 77 passengers and 7 crew members were on the first journey using the new Point Defiance bypass route, designed to reduce the time of the trip.
Amtrak 501, emergency. We are on the ground.
At 7:40 this morning, at the Mounts Road overpass near DuPont, 13 cars jumped the tracks, with some tumbling into traffic on I-5 below.
And then all of a sudden, I just feel a whole bunch of turning and rocking of the train, and I just grabbed onto the chair in front of me for dear life. My laptop went flying, my phone went flying. It was all the way at the other end. People were screaming. It was crazy.
Scott Cladgett took these pictures of the aftermath. He had just moved to the dining car, narrowly avoiding injury or death.
The car, it's completely torn open, so I'm not sure if, how it ended for anybody that's on that cart.
And that was the one you were on?
I was on, yeah.
And you moved?
I moved within minutes.
I was like, whoa, what is just going on? Because I just see sparks flying and I was like, what is going on?
Trevor Colvey was driving 20 to 30 feet away from the train. He stopped his car and stepped up to help.
I saw smoke. Next thing you know, myself and a few others are trying to get people medical care when we can.
Last Friday, KIRO 7's Kevin McCarty took a trial run on this train and said it moved fast but smoothly.
Thanks to the bypass, we'll be able to shave 10 minutes off the travel time.
The train is designed to move close to 80 miles an hour. While Amtrak is not speculating on a cause, there are reports the train was moving at 81 miles an hour. The track was under control of Sound Transit. The train was dispatched by BNSF. NTSB investigators are on scene, but haven't yet determined if speed was a factor.
It's a little bit too early to know. Right now, we're sending investigators onto the scene, so we'll find all of that.
Diesel and battery acid were also spilled. The Washington Department of Ecology told us the fuel and the acid are in the soil, not in the water. That's one bit of good news in an otherwise devastating day.
That and the amazing work of all of those emergency responders out there. Thanks, Dave. Steve?
As we continue our in-depth coverage, we dig further into the investigation of what could have happened to Amtrak 501. It will likely take months for the official investigation to be complete, but KIRO 7 consulted transportation disaster experts who have already pinpointed a few areas of focus. KIRO 7's Amy Clancy is here with some of those early theories. Amy?
Steve, of course, this is all very preliminary, but soon after the crash, one of the first questions was, how fast was that train going? From Chopper 7, the derailment's devastation is clear.
We are on the bridge 5 in the school on the freeway. We need EMS.
So are the questions that now need to be asked, starting with the train's speed at the time of the crash. According to the Washington State Department of Transportation, the speed of trains approaching that curve should be no higher than 30 miles per hour.
I've seen reports that this train was traveling its last speed at 81 miles an hour. Approaching a curve like that, I find that very hard to believe that that was the speed it should have been operating at.
Keith Millhouse is a nationally known rail safety expert who was named chairman of Metrolink after this Metrolink crash near Los Angeles in 2008. An engineer who was texting caused the deaths of 25 people. Millhouse was brought in to increase safety. KIRO Cairo 7 tracked Millhouse down in L.A. He told us a system called positive train control could have prevented the crash near DuPont because the satellite-based system overrides the operator in case of human error. If a train is traveling too fast, positive train control intervenes and slows it down. The line where today's crash occurred will have positive train control, but not until next year.
Based upon passenger descriptions of going into the curve, feeling shaking, and then turning over, that's very consistent with overspeed.
The biggest question in my mind, considering this is a brand new route, is going to be the speed in the corner.
We also wanted to talk to Sims Weimuller, a Seattle lawyer who represents transportation accident victims. He expects dozens of lawsuits to eventually be filed because of today's incident once a cause is determined.
It's a new route for the 501, but it's old track. And so there can be a question about infrastructure and whether the track was in adequate shape for this type of use. Are there defects to either the lines or to the engines themselves? I don't know yet whether this was a push or a pull engine, but there are concerns with push engines in particular. Are those being addressed?
From today's coverage, Millhouse told Cairo 7 it appears the engine was pushing, not pulling the cars.
When the locomotive is at the front of the train, it is a heavier unit, so can oftentimes knock debris out of the way more effectively than when the train is being pushed.
Now, we don't know if there was debris on the track or if it may have caused any problems. A lot more will be known once the train's data recorder is examined, and that is similar to a black box on an airplane.
And we will get that. It is going to take some time for all of these details to come out. But with respect to Mr. Millhouse, what else did he have? Did he have any suggestions for safety, rail safety?
He would like to see every rail operator, Amtrak, freight trains, anybody who operates a train to have inward-pointing surveillance cameras so that every move that the engineer makes is seen. Now, there's been a lot of pushback from unions who represent them, calling it a privacy issue. But Millhouse says when you're dealing with the safety of the public, that should take precedence over privacy issues.
So it starts there, but then after an emergency, people want to give to help the victims.
Yeah, but for your sake, for the victim's sake. Jesse joins us now with how to give smart after a tragedy. Jesse.
Monique, your heart pumps blood. The blood that you can give. Your heart also beats with emotion, and that can cause you to give money when you need to slow down and wait.
I turned on the news and I saw it, and it was awful. It was terrible.
The gift of giving blood can be measured in lives, and this was a day where those gifts were in desperate need. For Seattle's Bailey Luter, this incident moved her to give blood for the first time in years.
It's been about 10 years, so it's what brought me back to donating blood. I couldn't just sit by and not do something.
But like most things in life, timing is everything. And according to BloodWorks Northwest CEO Dr. James Aubuchon, Christmas is not a good time for an emergency of this size.
So to have a large, unexpected emergency use of blood occur right on top of short inventories makes it all the more difficult.
So try this. Every holiday, give your fellow man the gift of life.
Whenever there's an emergency, that use is added on top of the baseline use that is occurring anyway for heart surgeries, for cancer patients, for all the patients who need transfusion on a daily basis.
You can give blood or cash. We are already taking a look at GoFundMe pages. This campaign's goal is for $100,000, but there's little or no information being provided about where that money will go. So Washington's Attorney General, Bob Ferguson, provides these giving tips. First, be suspicious of immediate donation requests. Remember, it's not necessary to donate immediately. The need will be there for some time. If you get a call from a group saying it's helping victims, don't give in to pressure and don't provide your credit card number over the phone.
Cairo 7 at 11 starts right now.
Breaking now, a deadly derailment near DuPont.
Emergency. We are on the ground.
13 cars of an Amtrak Cascades train derailed.
I see sparks flying and it's going off the track.
First responders jump into action.
At that point, we just started grabbing people under our arms and carrying them down to where the EMTs started showing up.
Tonight, 3 people are dead, dozens injured, and some families are facing a tough reality. Tonight we have team coverage of the deadly derailment.
And we begin with Cairo 7's Dee Dee's son. She is live right now in Tacoma. And Dee Dee, you have learned some families are getting some very tough news there tonight.
Yeah, I have been in contact with families tonight struggling to get information, just desperate to learn news about their loved ones. And we have just learned that some of those family members here at this Courtyard Marriott in Tacoma have learned that their family members have passed away. Now, we do know the identities of 2 of the victims who died in the Amtrak derailment today, but we are not releasing their names at this point. Family members tell me they're still working on notifying everyone. Before we found out this tragic outcome tonight, I was messaging on social media and talking with friends of victims on the phone who were immensely frustrated after being unable to find their loved ones. I'm told they tried to call Amtrak's emergency phone line again and again, and they called every single hospital that received a patient from this derailment and crash. They reached out to Amtrak officials and even called the governor's office, struggling for more than 12 hours to find out where their loved ones are. Some of them finally learned here tonight their family members passed away. I've also talked with family of people who are hurt but will be okay. The sister of an Amtrak employee, Eileen Trainer, tells me Eileen has a broken tailbone, many cuts and some punctures. But though she's in a lot of pain, she is in good spirits. She tells me 2 other Amtrak employees were also hurt and airlifted to Harborview in Seattle. I talked with a spokesperson for the hospital who tells me the victims came from Olympia. She says one of the men is still critical.
You know, there's a range of injuries that all 3 have suffered, and they're ranging. They're from a facial fracture to lung injury to, broken bones to head. So it runs the gamut.
We know one of the 3 men at Harborview also has a spine injury, and there's a long road of recovery for many ahead. Some people here tonight tell me they were just left feeling helpless and frustrated by a lack of communication, and I'll be asking Amtrak officials what can be done to improve that communication for families impacted by this tragedy. Live in Tacoma, Dee Dee Sun, Cairo 7 News.
The Amtrak Cascades 501 train was made up of 14 cars. 13 of them derailed during the train's first commercial service on a new high-speed route. The question, of course, tonight is why. And Cairo 7's Ranji Sinha is live right now at the crash scene. Ranji, crews are already working to clear the area.
That is the case, Monique. For the past 3 hours, a crane has been in place doing the very delicate work of moving those rail cars and debris off of that area where the train slid off the tracks when it came around the turn this morning at 7:30.
Amtrak 501. Emergency. We are on the ground.
This is a tragic event. And on behalf of everyone at Amtrak, I want to express that we're deeply saddened.
Officials at the scene of today's train derailment say the NTSB will investigate the cause of the incident that killed 3 people. The Washington State Patrol says 19 people escaped without injury, but 72 were transported from the scene to hospitals. 1 airlifted to Harborview Medical Center. The State Patrol admitted over the entire day this was an extremely difficult response, with personnel scaling muddy hills to get to the scene.
It was wet, it was cold, we had down power lines, we also had down trees, it was very slippery, and there's no access to this scene except from I-5.
Amtrak says 14 cars, including 2 locomotives, were involved. Officials wouldn't speculate on the train's speed, but on the route they can move at speeds up to 79 miles an hour on the newly upgraded tracks. John Forspring says he owns land next to the crash scene and questioned whether any high-speed train could safely navigate.
Any child who plays with the race car track knows that when you go on an incline, you got to increase power. Hairpin turn, you have to slow down.
Officials say all the train cars have been checked and cleared, and heavy machinery will move those cars. So this is a process that's going to take all night, it's going to last overnight?
Without a doubt. Right now, I wish I could give everybody a firm time on when we're going to have this open, but there's too many variables. We have to check the safety of that overpass, we have to check the safety of I-5, and we got to make sure that our first responders at scene are safe.
Now, a DuPont city official told Cairo 7 there was staff training at City Hall this morning, and they did discuss responding to a mass casualty event when the crash happened. Now, what we've told by the Department of Transportation is that I-5 southbound will remain closed into the morning, but the northbound lanes will be open. We're live in DuPont. Ranji Sinha, Cairo 7 News.
Well, a look from Google Maps now, plus our animation, highlights the rail curve in question, the direction the train was headed, and the 30-mile-an-hour speed limit for that section of track. That helped set the scene for the view of the disaster captured in this vantage point from Chopper 7. It shows just after the crash and gives you a good indication of what happened as the train derailed along that curve above I-5. The city of Lakewood sued to try to stop this new route. The city's about 8 miles northeast of the derailment and wanted to block the project because of speed and safety concerns. And just this past Friday, there were no issues as our Kevin McCarty was a passenger during the inaugural celebration of the same route. But back in July, Lakewood officials talked about why the higher train speeds on the Point Defiance bypass had them so worried.
These trains are doing 75 to 79 miles an hour, and so if you think you can beat that train, there's no way you can.
The city lost its lawsuit because the law generally prevents cities and towns from regulating rail lines. Sound Transit owns the tracks in question and told us today there were no serious problems during testing.
Now, just as soon as the train plunged onto I-5 today, heroes jumped in to help victims. At least 2 of them even got there before the first responders did. And Cairo 7's Jessica O spoke with that couple tonight. Jessica, they were driving to work when they realized they needed to stop and help.
That's right, Monique. And just to give you an idea of how difficult rescue efforts were, firefighters say they not only had to use the jaws of life, they had to use air chisels and ladders to get these people out. But before firefighters even arrived, a young couple happened to stop by and unexpectedly help these passengers.
We weren't really planning on doing anything.
But the sight was enough to make this couple pull over. A train was dangling off the highway. Turns out it wasn't the only thing that concerned Daniel Konzelman and Alicia Hoverson.
I was like, this is crazy. There's nobody here helping. There's people in there that might be dying, and we need to get in there.
They were 2 of the first people on scene after 13 cars from Amtrak's inaugural Cascades train derailed over I-5 in Lacey this morning.
Once we got up on the bridge was when I realized how bad it was.
Washington State Patrol says the crash killed 3 people. At least 100 others were hurt. Many of them got help from Daniel and Alicia, who arrived earlier than first responders did and helped passengers get out.
I didn't know what I was walking into, except for that I thought there was probably some fatalities.
But there was a lot of other people at that point still crawling out of the train.
Others on board couldn't move, so instead of walking away from the wreckage, Daniel ran towards it, smashing the windows of the overturned cars so he could get in.
There was 3 people pinned underneath that car that had flipped upside down. I felt an urgency because I didn't see anybody meeting the need, and I was like, why not me?
He and another officer helped free a woman who was badly hurt. Alicia says it was a miracle.
Can't even imagine like someone just lifting a car off of someone, like a train car.
The rescue efforts as unbelievable as the crash itself.
Just as we were walking around and seeing more people come out of the wreckage, it just started to be overwhelming.
Your mind's kind of going through over what you could see.
The couple still trying to wrap their minds around everything they saw in one of Washington's worst train wrecks. Grateful they had a chance to help strangers, even if it happened in a most unexpected way.
I think God placed us there for a reason.
And it still is such an unbelievable sight to see all those cars dangling off the highway. As terrible as this crash was, the couple says it was encouraging to see the way that other passengers were helping each other at the scene. They say they have been watching coverage of this and say they are relieved tonight to know that some of the people they helped seem to be doing okay, but they do know the road to recovery will still be very long for some. Reporting live in Lacey tonight, Jessica O, Cairo 7 News.
Amazing. We talked earlier today to another driver who witnessed the crash and also stopped to help. Trevor Coovley shared cell phone pictures and spoke with us at the reunification area for families and victims of the derailment. He was still clearly shaken up by what he saw this morning.
It was going pretty fast. I'm thinking, what's going on? And then like maybe 2 minutes later, I see sparks flying and it's going off the track. She was hurt and I told her just to stay calm, and then somebody else came over and then I went to go help other people that needed it.
Coovley estimates his car was less than 100 feet from the train. He describes the whole experience as surreal.
Now, the traffic impact from the disaster was severe, as you can imagine, and it is still ongoing. The state DOT says 60,000 vehicles a day use the stretch of I-5 shut down by the derailment. Alternative routes quickly backed up despite Joint Base Lewis McChord opening a detour on the base to try and alleviate the pressure.
It usually takes me about 10 minutes, 15 minutes to get to work, but today it took about 2.5 hours.
I've been on the road from Port Angeles for 8.5 hours to get to Lacey, where my son is, and my granddaughter.
8.5 hours. Those are just a couple of the horror stories we heard out there, and that is why the State Patrol and State DOT are urging all drivers to avoid the area entirely if they can. And right now, I-5 southbound will divert at Center Drive through JBLM to State Route 510, and northbound I-5, it is open. State Patrol wants everyone heading that direction to remain on the interstate.
Washington Governor Jay Inslee declared a state of emergency after the derailment, calling it a tragic incident and a serious and ongoing emergency. In a statement he wrote, "Trudy and I are holding in our hearts everyone on board and are praying for the many injured. They are our top priority, and I know first responders are doing everything to ensure everyone has the care they need."
Our coverage continues, and you are looking live now as we wait for a media conference to begin from the NTSB. That is the agency taking the reins on this investigation. Their remarks are just a few minutes away.
KIRO 7 is staying on the scene of breaking news near DuPont, where an Amtrak train derailed this morning. While the investigation is in its early stages, crews are working to clear the debris. The real-time traffic team will monitor the traffic as southbound I-5 remains closed. Live team coverage of this breaking news continues at 4:30 a.m. and anytime on the KIRO 7 News app.
And we're also live at the NTSB Newser at SeaTac, where we are waiting to hear from the agency's GO team. We have seen them set up their podium and their backdrop, but still none of the members of the NTSB and the investigators who are coming out here and have recently arrived from the East Coast. Now, we will stream it live. That is the news conference on KIRO7.com whenever they do step up to that podium.